Dustin, why should people look into politics?
Well, politics is important because basically when we say politics, we just mean how we organize our society together as people. Now, I think as Christians, we have a special role in politics to promote Christ, not only in our personal lives, but in the political life that we organize as a society, so that the values, the basic Christian values we believe in as Christians, can be promoted throughout the whole society.
So do you think there's a place for God in politics?
Absolutely. I think there's a necessary place for God in politics. I think we get good politics from having faith in the Lord. And I think a good Christian worldview will tell you that order and beauty and truth come from God.
Mm-hmm.
Any good political system of any kind has to be based around order and beauty and truth. And so if you're not basing those things around the Creator as well, then your politics are probably going to be lacking.
Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit about your faith, since you mentioned faith?
Yeah. I've been a Christian for most of my life, but it influences everything I do. I'm obviously very passionate about politics. That's my major. That's kind of what I'm interested in. And that's heavily influenced by the work of Christ. It also, I guess, one of the big things it teaches me, my faith teaches me as someone interested in politics, is that I shouldn't ever be trying to solve the world's problems on my own.
Mm-hmm.
I should recognize the limitations of a human being, in that we're all flawed, depraved creatures needing salvation ourselves. So just because I'm a Christian, I'm trying to promote Christian values in politics, doesn't mean I'm perfect either, and it means I'm still going to mess up. And so we can't be creating a political system with some kind of vision of utopia and creating heaven on earth, because that's not possible. That's not what we're called to do. I think we're called to create limits for politics, create limits for ourselves, because we recognize that creatures are depraved and in need of salvation, and then promote salvation to people so that they can realize it and have that personal relationship with Christ that I enjoy.
Yeah. I recently learned that in the 1800s, they used to have church inside of the Congress place in Washington, D.C. And can you imagine that? And put yourself in their shoes. If you're going back to the 1800s, you being as a political science student,
Yeah.
and just being in that environment, how would that be for you?
Well, it'd be a different environment from today. Today is a little more restrained when it comes to how we associate religion with politics. Definitely back then it was a more noticeable part of people's day. And for the politicians that lived and worked in Washington, like you said, they would sometimes have church in the Capitol building.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a different environment, and probably made it much easier to live and work in a Christ-centered setting when you're going to work as a politician.
Mm-hmm. And it seems like when it comes to politics, as America is growing right now, it seems like they're trying to take God out of stuff. For example, in the Constitution they used to have "in the year of our Lord," and that was taken out. What's the issue with taking God out of things?
I think there's a lot of influences moving American society in all sorts of different directions. I think, my opinion maybe isn't quite mainstream, but I think we're both moving towards God and away from God at the same time. I think we're polarizing, and as the country gets bigger and as all these diverse influences come in, some people are becoming way more secular, moving away from faith. They think religion is dead, God is dead, that's from the past. But then some people are moving back towards the Lord. I think there's an encouraging movement in Washington and in inner cities like Tim Keller's church in New York, where intellectuals are coming to the faith again. So I think there's this split happening, and we're kind of being polarized as a society. But on the secular side, there is definitely a desire to repress anything that has to do with Christianity, anything that has to do with any kind of a moral judgment, which is how a lot of people see God. They just see basically a judge in the sky that tells them what they can and can't do, and they don't like that. And so it makes them uncomfortable, and there is definitely a desire to take God out of government, to take any remnant of the Christian history of the United States out of the United States government. And I think that's dangerous. And I think it will really quickly be easy to forget where we came from and how important faith was to the people that founded our country, how important that Christian worldview is to keeping liberty and justice and order in America.
You said there's something that was important about history and it being dangerous.
Yeah.
Is this a lack of respect for history and towards history, rather?
I think so. I think that's a good way of saying it. I think and again, not everyone's doing this in history and government, but for the people who do want to take God out of the school and out of the history books, out of government, I think it is in part because it's kind of revisionist history. They want to make the story of America this secular society that's post-God, post-religion, post-Christ, post-church,
Mm-hmm.
and that's just not true. We were founded by people who, many of them had different reasons for theologically why they were doing what they were doing, but almost all of them had a firm foundation in the Lord.
How important is history to America and in politics?
Yeah, it's extremely important. I think when kids aren't taught good history in their schools,
Mm-hmm.
when kids aren't taught the importance of history and of learning where their country came from and learning what the foundations for the government are, they'll lose interest in being active citizens when they get older. They won't vote. They won't, worse than not voting, they won't engage in the political process and all. They won't know what's going on. History is the foundation to know what's come before, what's given us these opportunities that we have in America that are so precious to us. And if we forget the history, we'll forget why what we have is so important, in fact, and we'll really be losing out on what makes America so special.
And this is pretty much my golden question. Do you think God is taken out of America?
Well, I want to be careful to say I don't think God can be taken out of something that God doesn't want to be taken out of, because I think he's entirely sovereign. I think there is an effort underway from secular forces who fear the Lord, but not in a holy way, to rid America of God. That's absolutely underfoot in America. And I think we need to fight against that, and I think we need to be wary of it. At the same time, I don't think we need to be alarmed, and I don't think we need to be losing our cool in how we relate to the secular world, because I think we should show non-Christians that, look, we have faith like the people in the early church who were standing before lions and coliseums, facing a liberal Supreme Court that might limit our Christian liberties. Not something I prefer, but not a coliseum full of lions. You know what I mean? If we excite ourselves to the degree where we kind of stake this as like the last battle for the church in the world, first of all, that's not true, because the church is a lot more powerful than any political leader in any political nation that's ever existed. And second of all, it kind of shows how cheaply we esteem our own Christianity if we do that, I think. And so I want to be careful to really firmly hold hard and fast to the truth ourselves, the truth of Christ, of the Lord. And I want to defend that in the public sphere, and I think we'll be successful in preserving that in America. But I also want people to know, if it's not God's plan for America to be around, that's okay for the church. The church is more important than any one country. So.
All right, Dustin Wahl, thanks for your time.
Thanks so much.